Mira Vale's boots kicked up the dust as she walked, eyes fixed on the dirt road ahead but seeing none of it. Her dress, torn at the hem and clinging to her legs from sweat and dust, dragged behind her like a flag of defeat. The air was thick with summer heat, buzzing with flies, and the low murmur of voices that stopped the second she passed by. No one offered a hand. No one asked if she was all right. They just watched. Eyes squinted behind curtains, behind store windows, behind half-closed doors. She was a show, a warning. She kept walking. It had been 3 days since the sheriff came to the boarding house and told her she had an hour to leave. No charges, no trial, just whispers and shame that stuck to her skin like the dust on her clothes. No one wanted a woman like her in town. Not after what happened. Not after that boy turned up dead. The truth? She never touched him. Never even looked his way. Not really. But someone had to be blamed, and she was easy to point at. Pretty face. Quiet voice. No husband. In a past no one could quite name, but everyone seemed to know. Mira Vale didn't cry. Not anymore. She'd used up every tear back in Texas. The day she left behind a house that wasn't hers and a man who never hit her where it showed. The bruises healed, but the silence stayed. She learned how to disappear in a room full of people. Learned how to smile with her mouth, but not her eyes. Learned how to keep her secrets locked down tight where no one could reach them. The sun hung low when she saw the old church up ahead. It looked abandoned, stone-chipped, windows dusty, cross leaning like it was tired of standing. She walked around back and sat on the cool earth in the shadow of the building. Her feet ached. Her throat burned. But this place, at least, didn't look at her like she was filth. A lizard darted across a rock nearby. She watched it disappear into a crack and wished she could do the same. Behind her, something shifted. Just a sound, a scuff of a boot maybe. She turned quick, ready to bolt. But it was only a man leaning in the doorway of the church, shadow covering most of his face. He didn't say anything, just looked at her like he knew something she didn't. "You lost?" he asked after a beat. His voice was low, even not cruel like others had been. Not pitying either. Mira Vale didn't answer. He stepped forward, just enough for her to see the scar running from his temple down through his cheek. His eyes were dark, unreadable. She didn't know him. Not from this town. Not from anywhere. "You got a name?" She swallowed hard. "Mira Vale." He nodded once, like that was all he needed. "You hungry?" Her stomach gave her away before she could lie. He turned without another word and walked back into the church. After a moment, she followed. Inside, it was cooler. The place was stripped bare, pews gone, altar broken down to scraps. But there was a small fire in a metal bucket, and beside it, a pot of something that smelled better than anything she'd had in weeks. He handed her a tin bowl. She sat on the floor, legs crossed, spoon in hand, and ate without looking at him. He watched her. "Where you headed?" he asked finally. "Don't know," she said. "Away." He leaned against the wall. "Ain't always far enough." She glanced up at him. "You got a name?" He hesitated. "Matthew." She didn't press further. Didn't ask what he was doing in an empty church, or why he cooked food like he expected someone to walk in hungry. People like them didn't ask questions like that. They sat in silence. Later, she lay on the wooden floor, wrapped in an old coat he gave her. She stared at the rafters, heart beating slow but heavy. She didn't trust him. Not really. But for the first time in days, she wasn't alone. When she woke the next morning, he was gone. The pot was cold, the fire out. She thought he'd left her like the rest. But tucked under her bowl was a folded piece of paper. "Stay off the main road. They're still looking." She stared at the note, her hands trembling. He knew about the boy, about the way the town turned on her. And he hadn't turned her in. That's when she realized it. Someone wanted her gone. Not just out of town, but quiet. Vanished. Maybe dead. And whoever Matthew was, he knew more than he let on. Mira Vale stood up slowly. Dust brushed off her dress. Her eyes fixed on the door. If she was going to survive, she needed answers. She needed to know who Matthew really was, and why he called her by a name she hadn't heard in 2 years, before she'd even told it to him. Because last night, just before she fell asleep, when he thought she wasn't listening. He'd said it, soft as a prayer. "Don't worry, Mary. I got you now." Mira Vale followed the trail that led away from the church, her mind full of questions she couldn't answer. She didn't know where she was going, just that she couldn't go back, and she couldn't stand still. The morning heat was already rising when she reached a crossroads, and standing there like she'd been waiting her whole life was a woman with a rifle slung over her shoulder and a pack mule tied to a fence post. She was tall, hard-faced, with eyes that didn't blink much. Mira Vale tensed, but the woman just looked her over. "You Matthew's girl?" she asked. Mira Vale froze. "What? Didn't think so," the woman muttered. "But you were in his church. So either you're in trouble or you're about to be." Mira Vale narrowed her eyes. "Who are you?" The woman smirked without humor. "Name's Josie. I used to know Matthew. A long time ago, back before he stopped choosing sides." She turned away and started loading the mule. Mira Vale should have walked off then, but something in Josie's tone made her stay, made her want to understand what was happening around her. Because clearly, whatever she'd been dragged into didn't start in that town. It started somewhere deeper, somewhere older. Josie glanced back. "You hungry?" Mira Vale nodded. She hated how fast the word fell out of her mouth now. They walked together in silence for a while, through the scrub and brush. Josie didn't talk unless she had something to say. She carried herself like a woman who'd survived worse than words. That night, around a fire under the open sky, Mira Vale asked her about Matthew. Josie stared into the flames. "He used to ride with a posse out of Santa Fe. Bounty work, men who tracked killers and thieves, and didn't always care much about law. Matthew was the best of them. Fast with a gun, fast with his mind. But something happened. One day he just quit. Disappeared. Word was he saw something that made him put his guns down for good." Mira Vale leaned in. "And now?" Josie shook her head. "Now he's back. I don't know why. They didn't sleep much that night. Coyotes howled somewhere in the distance, and Mira Vale's dreams were restless. She woke before dawn, feeling watched. But when she looked around, Josie was already up, checking the horizon, ready for trouble. The next town they reached wasn't much. A saloon, a few shops, a telegraph station. Josie told Mira Vale to keep her head down and wait outside the saloon while she checked in with someone. Mira Vale sat on a bench under a faded awning, watching the dust spin in little whirlpools down the street. That's when a man stepped out of the general store, wiping his hands on a handkerchief. He was clean-shaven, too clean for this part of the country, and his suit didn't belong here either. But it wasn't his clothes that made Mira Vale shiver. It was the way he smiled when he saw her, like he already knew who she was. "Afternoon," he said, tipping his hat. She nodded, silent. "You new in town?" "I'm just passing through." He stepped closer. "Funny, that's what the last girl said. The one who went missing last fall." Mira Vale stood up. "I didn't mean to scare you," he said smoothly. "Just making conversation. Name's Griffin. I'm an investigator, hired by families who lose people to places like this." She didn't believe him. Not for a second. Griffin leaned in slightly. "I know what happened to you. Back in Oxbow. I know they blamed you for that boy's death. And I know you didn't do it." Mira Vale stared at him. "But someone wanted you blamed. That means you've seen something. Heard something. Something that wasn't meant for your ears." He smiled again. This time, it didn't reach his eyes. "I like to help," he said. "If you'll let me." Josie came out of the saloon just then, eyes sharp, rifle slung low. Griffin tipped his hat again and walked off, slow and easy like he hadn't just thrown Mira Vale into another storm. Josie watched him disappear around the corner. "You talked to him?" "He talked to me." "What did he say?" "That he's here to help." Josie spat in the dust. "He's not." They left town by nightfall. Mira Vale didn't ask where they were going. She didn't want to know. Not yet. Too much had already changed. A day later, they found Matthew again. He was camped near a dry creek bed, cooking beans over a small flame. He didn't look surprised to see them. Josie walked up and folded her arms. Griffin found her. Matthew didn't look up. I figured he would. Mira Vale sat down across from him. Who is he? Matthew stirred the pot. A ghost. Same as me. She narrowed her eyes. Stop talking in riddles. He looked at her then, really looked. He works for a man named Cyrus Blaine. Used to run a ring smuggling girls out of El Paso. Fancy dresses, big promises. Then they disappear. Some ended up dead. Some worse. One of those girls was my sister. Mira Vale's breath caught. What happened to her? She sent me a letter. Said she was scared. That someone knew she was thinking of running. I got there too late. He stopped stirring. I found her body behind a church. They'd left her like trash. Mira Vale didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. Matthew's jaw tensed. I tracked him for years. Got close to Blaine once. Close enough to make him bleed. But Griffin, he's Blaine's leash dog. Talks nice. Wears fine clothes. Kills quiet. Mira Vale swallowed. Why is he after me? Matthew's voice turned low. Because someone in Oxbow was working for Blaine. The boy who died, he saw something. Maybe he tried to help you. Maybe he just got in the way. Either way, they used you to cover it up. Josie nodded. Town turned on you too fast. Like they were ready for it. Mira Vale shook her head slowly. I didn't know any of this. You weren't supposed to, Matthew said. They were supposed to scare you out or bury you in silence. She looked at him hard. Then why are you helping me? He paused, then said, soft but steady, because when I saw you, I thought of her. My sister, the way she used to look before fear got to her. And because you don't run like someone who's guilty. Mira Vale stared into the fire. Her hands were shaking, but she kept them still. Josie broke the silence. We need to move. Griffin won't stop. Mira Vale looked between them. Matthew with his haunted eyes, Josie with her bitterness, Griffin with his too clean smile. Everyone had their own reason for being here. Their own ghosts. Their own lies. And Mira Vale, she wasn't sure who to trust. But she knew one thing. She wasn't running anymore. Not from them. Not from her past. Not even from the truth. The night they rode into Calder Hill, Mira Vale knew something had changed. The air felt tight like a storm was pushing in behind her ribs. Josie rode ahead, stiff in the saddle, while Matthew rode a few feet behind, too quiet. For hours they hadn't said much, and Mira Vale could feel something coiling in that silence. Something waiting to snap. The town itself was strange, too quiet for the hour, too clean. The buildings looked kept up, the windows polished, but there was no music from the saloon, no laughter in the street, no dogs barking. Just silence, broken by hooves on dirt. It felt like a place that had been emptied before it was ever lived in. Josie glanced back once, met Matthew's eye, then nodded toward the inn on the east end. We'll stay the night, get supplies. Be gone by dawn. Matthew said nothing. Inside the inn, a woman with pale hair and dark eyes handed them keys without asking names. Her smile was tight. Her hands were too clean. Mira Vale watched her, something prickling at the back of her mind. Later, in the room she shared with Josie, Mira Vale sat on the edge of the bed and whispered, "Do you trust him?" Josie pulled off her boots with a sigh. Matthew? Used to, before he walked away. Now I don't know what to believe. Why did he leave? Josie hesitated, fingers pausing at her belt buckle. We were tracking a girl. Walt Blaine's. She was just a kid. Got taken out of Las Cruces. We found her, barely alive. She'd been dumped like the others, but she wasn't dead. Not yet. What happened? Matthew froze. Wouldn't move. Wouldn't speak. Just dropped his gun and walked off. Mira Vale stared at her. What? Josie looked her straight in the eye. Because she looked like his sister. That night, Mira Vale didn't sleep. Something Josie said kept echoing. He walked away. But why now, after all that, had he come back? Why her? She got out of bed quietly, walked down the hallway barefoot, and found Matthew sitting alone in the darkened parlor, a bottle in his hand, gun resting on the table. You're not sleeping, he said. Neither are you. He poured another shot and didn't drink it. Why are we here? She asked. He didn't look at her. Because Griffin is. And Blaine. Calder Hill is where they set up shop now. Not out in the open. Quiet. Underground. Mira Vale stepped closer. You're going to kill them. Matthew's fingers curled around the bottle. That was always the plan. And after, he looked up at her. His eyes were red-rimmed, tired. After? I don't know. Don't care. She watched him for a long time. Do you even see me? Or just her? He flinched. Mira Vale's voice dropped. Your sister. Is that all I am to you? A chance to make it right. No, he said almost too fast. No, you're not her. Then stop looking at me like I'm already dead. In a quiet that followed, Mira Vale felt the ground shift under her. She turned to go, but he caught her wrist. I never meant to use you, he said. But maybe I did. Maybe I didn't want to be alone in this. Mira Vale pulled her hand away gently. You should have said that before. She went back to bed, her mind spiraling. At dawn, they loaded up in silence. The town still hadn't come alive. It was like walking through a stage set where the actors forgot to show. Josie stayed behind to gather maps, while Mira Vale and Matthew went to meet a contact near the edge of town, a man named Ezra, who'd once worked for Blaine before turning on him. Ezra lived in a shack behind the old livery stable, and from the moment he opened the door, Mira Vale didn't like him. Too twitchy, too eager. He smiled too fast, talked too much. Said he had names, locations, ledgers. Proof. Matthew listened with half an ear, but Mira Vale noticed his eyes drifting to the corner of the shack, to the coat rack near the door. There was a hat hanging there. Not just any hat. Griffin's hat. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could say a word, the door slammed behind them. Two men stepped in with rifles drawn. Ezra stepped back, hands up like he'd done nothing wrong. Sorry, friend. They offer more. Matthew didn't hesitate. He went for his gun and took one of them down before the other cracked him across the head with the rifle, but Mira Vale screamed. She went down fighting, fists swinging, but it didn't matter. Everything went black. When she came to, she was tied to a chair in a dim room, an office, maybe judging by the shelves. And sitting across from her, legs crossed, was Griffin. He smiled like they were old friends. You made it farther than I expected. Where is he? She rasped. Oh, he's alive. For now. But I don't really care about him. He leaned forward. I care about you. Mira Vale's pulse pounded. You're not just some girl who got in the way, Griffin said softly. You were with a woman named Alma Keene in Texas. Remember her? Mira Vale's stomach dropped. She didn't say anything. Alma ran one of Blaine's houses. But she flipped, started talking to marshals. You were there. You heard things. You saw things. You knew. Mira Vale clenched her jaw. You were supposed to be buried with that house when it burned. Her voice came out hoarse. You lit that fire. Griffin tilted his head, smiling. You remember now, don't you? Flashes came back. Smoke, screaming. Alma dragging Mira Vale out the back before the roof collapsed. Mira Vale running barefoot down a dry ravine, lungs burning, skin blistered. You thought you got away, he said. But people like you never really do. He stood up. Blaine wants you delivered. But personally, I'd rather be done with this here. He drew his pistol and pointed it at her head. That's when the window behind him shattered. Gunfire exploded in the room. Griffin dropped, blood pouring from his neck. Josie climbed through the shattered frame, rifle in hand, eyes blazing. Took you long enough to get caught. Mira Vale gasped for breath. Matthew, he's alive. Wounded but alive. You good? Mira Vale nodded as Josie cut her loose. They made out fast. Fire broke out in the building behind them. Someone must have knocked over a lantern during chaos. By the time they reached the edge of town, flames were lighting the sky. Matthew was leaning against a wagon, bleeding from his shoulder, but upright. Mira Vale ran to him, heart in her throat. He looked at her through a haze. You made it. She touched his face, voice breaking. You idiot. You should have let me fight. He gave a weak smile. Didn't want to lose you too. As they rode away from the burning town, Mira Vale looked back once and saw people running through the smoke. Blaine's empire was falling, or at least shaking, but none of it felt finished. Not yet. Later, in a quiet canyon outside the reach of law or lawlessness. Mira Vale sat by the fire and looked at Matthew. "I remember now," she said. He looked up. "I was with Alma. She tried to protect me. She died for it." Matthew nodded slowly. "And now," she asked, "what do we do?" Josie poured a tin of coffee. "Now we tear it all down, ledger by ledger, name by name." The stakes had changed. This wasn't about survival anymore. It was about justice. Or revenge. Maybe both. But Mira Vale was done running. She lost too much already. And now, she had nothing left to lose. The fire from Calder Hill still clung to Mira Vale's skin days after they escaped it. Her hands shook when she tried to sleep. Smoke twisted behind her eyes, and Griffin's blood still stained the inside of her memory. She thought killing him would bring peace, but hadn't. It only opened more questions, and it left something cold inside her that hadn't been there before. Josie didn't talk much now. She rode with her head down, jaw locked tight, like she knew the calm wouldn't last. Matthew, wounded and slower than before, said even less. They made camp near a dry riverbed that night, somewhere in the no man's land between Calder Hill and Fort Fallow. Josie crouched over the map, tracing routes with the end of her knife. Mira Vale sat nearby, silent, her knees pulled to her chest. The quiet between them wasn't peaceful. It was waiting to snap, and it did. "We go east," Josie said finally. "Fort Fallow has rail records. Supply manifests. If Blaine moved girls through there, they'd have logs. We get in. We pull what we can. We burn the rest." "We," Mira Vale said, sharper than she meant. Josie looked up. Mira Vale stood slowly. "You keep saying we, but this isn't your fight." Josie raised an eyebrow. "It is now." "Why?" Mira Vale stepped forward. "Because of Matthew? Because of guilt? Or because you've got nowhere else to be?" Josie didn't flinch. "I lost someone too, Mira Vale. I don't say her name because I still see her face when I close my eyes. So don't talk to me about who this fight belongs to." Matthew tried to speak, but Mira Vale cut him off. "And you," she said, turning on him. "You knew I'd been at Alma's house. You knew who I was from the start, didn't you?" Matthew's eyes met hers. "Yes." The word hit her like a slap. Mira Vale felt her mouth go dry. "You told me you saw your sister in me, but you already knew. You didn't see her. You saw a way back in. I didn't plan it that way, but you let it happen." Josie stood now, tension rising like heat off the rocks. "We don't have time for this." Mira Vale turned on her. "You don't get to decide when this matters." Matthew's voice was hoarse. "I try to protect you." "No," Mira Vale said. "You used me." And Josie, she stood back and watched it happen. Josie stepped forward. "You think you're the only one who's been used? I carried your weight across 2 counties while you figured out whether you were going to run or not. You want to fight? Fight. But don't spit in the face of the people who dragged you out of hell." Mira Vale's chest heaved. "You don't know me. I know what it looks like when someone's standing at the edge of a cliff pretending they're not going to jump." Silence fell, cold and sharp. Matthew finally said, "We all crossed lines getting here." "That doesn't mean we can't know," Mira Vale cut in. "It means we stop pretending we're doing this for the right reasons." She turned away, walking past the fire, past the horses, past the edge of the light. She didn't sleep that night. None of them did. The next day, they reached Fort Fallow, a larger town than the rest, with soldiers on the outskirts and watchtowers above the train yard. Mira Vale had only been there once years ago. The place hadn't changed, just got dirtier, colder. Josie arranged for a room above a meat shop. They split up to find records. Matthew went to the freight office. Mira Vale and Josie went to the telegraph station. Inside, Mira Vale's eyes scanned logbooks, fingers trembling with the effort not to feel too much. Then she saw it, Blaine's name, hidden in the margins beside a string of initials. Supply runs disguised as livestock transfers. Girls, written off as cattle. She shoved the page toward Josie. "There, that's proof." Josie looked at it and didn't smile. "We take it to the marshal," Mira Vale said. Josie was quiet. Too quiet. "What?" Mira Vale asked. There is no marshal, Josie muttered. Not one we can trust. Mira Vale frowned. Then who? Josie looked away. I know someone, but you're not going to like it. Mira Vale followed her out, down a back alley, through a maze of crumbling fences. They reached an old bathhouse with broken shutters and curtains drawn too tight. Inside was smoke and silence. The man who greeted them wasn't what Mira Vale expected. Young, handsome, with a cane and a limp. He smiled like he'd never been hurt in his life. His name was Silas Vane, and he claimed to be an interested party. Josie explained the evidence. Silas listened, nodded, poured himself a drink. You're very brave, he said to Mira Vale, voice like sugar and poison mixed together. But bravery doesn't get things done. Money does. Power does. Mira Vale crossed her arms. What do you want? Same as you, he said. Blaine gone. But I want his place more than his head. And that's where you come in. She felt her stomach twist. So you know better. I didn't say I was better. I said I was useful. Josie stared at the floor. You brought me here, Mira Vale said to her. You knew what he was. Josie didn't deny it. Mira Vale stepped back, cold spreading through her limbs. We're done. You walk out now, Silas warned. And you walk out alone. Blaine finds you in a week. Maybe less. Let him, Mira Vale said. I'd rather die on my feet than stand behind another monster. She turned and left. Josie didn't follow. Outside, rain had begun to fall, soft and slow. Mira Vale found Matthew near the edge of the train yard, holding his arm again, blood seeping through his sleeve. Where's Josie? He asked. Still lying to herself. Mira Vale pulled out the logbook. This is what we came for. And now we use it. Ow! Expose them. Burn all. He nodded. There's one more place. A depot near Loma Ridge. That's where the shipments start. You want to finish this? That's where we go. They rode that night. No fire, no rest. Just shadows and silence. Halfway to Loma Ridge, they heard hooves. Not one rider. Many. Mira Vale drew her pistol. Matthew reached for his rifle with his good hand. Figures came into view. Josie was at the front. You came back, Mira Vale said. I never left, Josie said. You were just too angry to see I was playing him. Silas. She nodded. He wanted to use me, so I let him. Took everything I could before I burned his stash house to the ground. Matthew grinned. You always were dramatic. Josie swung down from her horse. Let's finish this. At Loma Ridge, they found a depot. Small, almost hidden beneath a rise of land and trees. It looked abandoned from the front, but behind it, the ground was hollow. A tunnel. A place to move things where no one could see. Mira Vale stepped into the dark. The smell hit first. Mildew, sweat, blood. They found crates. Chains. A ledger listing names with prices. Her stomach turned. Matthew walked ahead. That's when the shot rang out. He went down. Mira Vale screamed. Griffin, bloody, battered, burned, but somehow still alive, stepped from the shadows. I warned you, he said. Josie moved too fast to think. She tackled him, gun roaring. The shot hit his leg, but he fired back. Mira Vale saw the bullet strike Josie's side, saw the blood bloom across her shirt like ink. Mira Vale grabbed Josie's dropped pistol, fired once, twice. Griffin fell. This time, he didn't get back up. Mira Vale crawled to Matthew. His shoulder again bad but not deadly. Josie, though, was pale. Fading. Tell me we got him, she whispered. We did. Good, Josie said, coughing. Then don't let this be for nothing. She died with her eyes open. Mira Vale closed them. She took the ledger, the chains, the names. Rode to Fort Fallow. Rode through doors. Laid it all out. Let the people see what they'd allowed to grow in their quiet. By week's end, Blaine was dead, shot trying to flee. His men turned on each other. Silas vanished. Matthew healed. Slowly. They didn't talk much in those days. Too much had been said. Too much had been lost. One night, Mira Vale asked him, Do you think we did the right thing? He answered, I don't know if it was right, but it was real. They buried Josie on a ridge above the town, where the wind blew clean. Mira Vale stood there long after the others left, because some things don't go away when justice comes. Some things stay, like shame, like fire, like the memory of a stranger stepping from shadows to say, "That's my wife." Even when it was a lie, even when it was the only thing that saved her. The storm didn't come from the sky. It came from within. The last pieces began to break the moment Mira Vale stepped onto the platform at Low Hollow Station, ledger in hand, her boots caked in red dirt. The evidence she carried was damning. Pages of names, dates, initials matched with dollar signs and freight codes. Every line was a scar someone would never forget. She handed it to a rail officer. He stared at it, then stared at her. "Where did you get this?" She didn't answer. She just turned and walked away. But the fire had already started. Blaine's web, once so carefully spun, tore apart in a matter of hours. His lieutenants turned on each other. Some tried to run. Some tried to destroy what Mira Vale had exposed. But truth, once lit, moves like a blaze, and Fort Fallow caught it fast. The marshal, long silent, long compromised, disappeared before sunrise. Someone said he boarded a train west with a suitcase full of bribes. Others said he never made it past the tracks. Matthew in Mira Vale watched the panic from a rooftop near the rail yard. He still wore a sling. The bullet to his shoulder had ripped through muscle and memory. Josie's death hung between them like unfinished words. "You started a war," he said. She nodded. "I know. You ready to finish it?" She didn't answer. She wasn't sure anyone ever was. By noon, Blaine's riders were out looking for her. Mira Vale didn't run. She went looking for them first. She rode into Crestwood with a pistol on her hip and the cold already set in her bones. She found two of his men drinking outside a butcher's barn. They recognized her too late. One reached for his rifle. The other cursed her name. She didn't wait. 3 shots. Both down. Word spread fast. Mira Vale wasn't hiding anymore. Blaine surfaced in the late hours outside Gray's Hollow, a town that hadn't seen law in over a year. He gathered what was left of his men, maybe 24, most of them loyal only to their next coin. He set a trap, sent word to Mira Vale through a burnt-out trader. "Come alone. Bring the rest of the ledgers, or we bury what's left of your friends." She knew it was bait. She knew it stank of death. But she also knew one thing more. Blaine wouldn't stop. Not until she was buried beside Josie, or Matthew, or any of the girls whose names filled those ledgers. So she went. Not alone, but she made it look like she was. She rode into Gray's Hollow at dusk, mist rising from the gutters. Her hair tied back, coat buttoned to the neck, pistol loose in its holster, rifle across her back. She carried a saddlebag filled with ash and torn pages, enough to pass for the ledgers. Blaine was waiting in the chapel, the only building still standing without rot on its roof. His men flanked the doors, posted on the pews, guns half drawn. She stepped inside. The room went still. Blaine smiled. "Always knew you were too proud to crawl. I'd rather burn." He laughed. "You already have." Mira Vale dropped the bag at his feet. Blaine opened it. His eyes narrowed. "Where's the rest?" "Gone. Like your power. You think that ledger brings justice? It's just paper. Ink fades. People forget." "No," Mira Vale said, voice steady. "But they remember fire." He lunged, gun drawn. Mira Vale fired first. The shot caught him in the shoulder, but not deep enough to stop him. He tackled her, slammed her into the wall. Her head cracked back. She tasted blood. Outside, Matthew and a small group of townsfolk, those who had suffered, those who had waited too long to act, moved in. Josie's last contacts, the one she left behind. They hit the guards fast, swift, no hesitation. Guns roared, glass shattered. Men screamed. Inside the chapel, Blaine pressed Mira Vale down. "You don't have it in you," he growled. "You talk fire, but you've always been cold underneath. You never cared about the girls. Or Josie. Just wanted something to bleed for. "You're wrong," she rasped. He raised his pistol. She jammed her knee into his ribs, rolled, grabbed the dropped revolver. He swung. She fired. This time the shot hit true. Blaine staggered, blinked like he didn't believe it, then dropped, dead. The chapel door burst open. Matthew ran in, bleeding from a graze across his cheek. "It's done," she said. He looked at Blaine's body, then at her. "Not yet," he replied, because the chapel was burning. Someone, maybe one of Blaine's men, maybe a stray shot, had lit a fire in the back room. Smoke flooded in. The floor groaned. Mira Vale grabbed the saddlebag, slung it over her shoulder. "Go!" They stumbled out through the side door, choking, coughing. The roof collapsed behind them. Outside, silence. The streets littered with wounded and dead. She stood in the ash, her hands blackened, her heart heavier than ever. It wasn't over. In the days that followed, the aftermath became clearer. The papers called it a reckoning. They wrote Mira Vale's name wrong, called her a widow, called her a rebel, called her many things she didn't feel. Matthew sat beside her one night, overlooking the rail yard. "They'll come again," he said. "Boo." Men like Blaine. Different faces. Same greed. She nodded. "Then we keep the fire lit." But that wasn't the end. The real choice came later, quietly, like most cruel things do. A lawyer arrived. Said the land Josie had burned, the stash house she'd torched. Silas Vane had left behind property deeds. One of them bore Mira Vale's name now. "She gave it to you," the lawyer said, "in writing. Said you'd know what to do with it. The land was worth money. A lot of it. Money that could build something, or buy silence." Mira Vale stared at the deed for a long time. Matthew asked, "What'll you do?" She didn't answer, because she saw it then, the cost of survival, the temptation of power, of becoming the next name in a ledger, just with cleaner handwriting. She could fix things, or control them. All it would take was compromise. So she burned the deed, watched it curl and blacken in the wind. And when the flames died, she whispered Josie's name. Because power didn't fix what had been broken. But fire told the truth, even when it left nothing behind. Snow came late that year. It dusted Fort Fallos rooftops like a secret the land was trying to hide. Everything felt too quiet after the fire. The chapel was just scorched stone now. Blackened beams curled like the ribs of a dead thing. People passed it with their heads down. No one talked much about what happened. Too many names missing. Too many wounds healing wrong. Mira Vale stayed. She didn't mean to at first. She'd planned to ride out before anyone noticed she was still around. But when she walked past the old boarding house Josie once called home, she found herself unlocking the door. The place still smelled like dust and lavender. Mira Vale cleaned it slowly like penance. Josie's mirror was cracked, her boots still beside the hearth. The quiet there didn't feel empty. It felt like waiting. Word of what happened traveled. Not just through rail towns, but down into the desert camps and up into the mining slopes. The ledger's Mira Vale saved ended up in the hands of a reform agent who promised investigation. Charges. Trials. But months passed and nothing came of it. The most powerful names never faced a judge. A few middlemen went to prison. A few vanished. The rest carried on, just with more caution. It burned Mira Vale in a way bullets never had. But she had work to do. She took the money Josie had hidden away. Not the land, not the bribes, but the savings from years of risk and barter, and reopened the house as a shelter for girls like the ones they'd failed. Runaways. Orphans. Survivors. It wasn't much. A small sign out front. A bed and a meal. But it was honest. And it wasn't on anyone's ledger. Matthew helped when he could. His shoulder never fully healed. Some days he moved like a man twice his age, but he was there, hammering boards, hauling wood, teaching the younger ones how to shoot straight, if they ever had to. He never asked Mira Vale to leave with him, and she never asked him to stay. What they had was something that lived in glances, in silence, in a way he passed her the coffee first every morning without needing to be told. But the town hadn't forgotten. Some saw Mira Vale as a savior. Others saw her as the reason everything cracked open. Shopkeepers whispered. A few women crossed the street when she walked by. The mayor, installed after the last one disappeared, came around once, asked if she planned to stir up more trouble. Mira Vale only smiled. If trouble means telling the truth, then yes. You should be scared. The mayor didn't come back. As for Blaine's men, most were dead or scattered. One of them, Reese, turned up months later in a rail town north of the Hollow, working as a hired guard. When he spotted Matthew in a saloon, he tried to run. Matthew didn't chase him. He just watched him go. Some ghost, he told Mira Vale, ain't worth dragging back. But not all ghosts stay gone. One morning, Mira Vale woke to find a girl on the porch. Barefoot, shivering, no older than 15. Her dress torn, her hands shaking. She wouldn't say where she came from, just kept repeating one thing. He said, I belong to him. Mira Vale didn't ask who. She just opened the door and pulled her inside. Later, the girl found Josie's photograph on the mantel. She stared at it for a long time. Was she your sister? No, Mira Vale said. She was more than that. The girl nodded like she understood. As winter deepened, more came. Some left again. Some stayed. Mira Vale didn't ask for stories unless they wanted to give them. She gave them work, food, warmth, but most of all, she gave them a place where no one owned them. She never tried to be a mother. She didn't know how, but she knew how to look someone in the eyes and tell them they mattered. And that was more than most had ever been given. One evening, Matthew found her sitting on the steps, watching the snow fall. You ever think about leaving? He asked. She looked out across the street at the rusting rail line where everything had started. Sometimes. But then I remember how many girls out there still think they're alone. He sat beside her. You're not alone either, you know. She gave him a tired smile. I know. That's the dangerous part. Spring came slower than usual. When it did, wildflowers broke through the cracks in the boards outside the chapel's ruins. No one planted them. No one watered them. But they grew anyway. One of the girls, Liza, 17, sharp-eyed, started keeping a journal. She said it helped her forget the bad days. She asked Mira Vale what she should call it. Mira Vale said, call it whatever name you want to remember. Liza thought about it, then wrote Josie on the first page. One day, a man rode into town, dressed too clean for the mud. He said he was with the Reform Board, here to thank Mira Vale for her service. He offered her a medal, a certificate. She stared at it, then said, will that keep another girl from being sold? He stammered, well, no, but it's symbolic. She didn't take it. Burn it, she said. Better used for the paper. He left confused, maybe even insulted, but she didn't need symbols. She had the girls, the ones who stayed, the ones who left and wrote letters from better places. She had scars that told the truth better than any medal could. One night, alone in her room, Mira Vale opened Josie's last letter again. The ink was faded now, the edges soft from being folded so many times. You were always stronger than you believed. Just don't let them turn you cruel. She traced the line with her fingertip, then folded it one last time, because it wasn't about winning. It wasn't about revenge. It was about what you do after, when no one's watching, when the fire's out, when all that's left is you and the choice of who you want to be. Mira Vale chose to stay, not because it was easy, but because someone had to, and because even dust can bloom if you don't walk away too soon.